Can Billy Napier finally get the Florida Gators over the Mark Stoops and Kentucky slump?
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Locked On Gators, part of the Locked On Podcast and Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day we are available daily and free reviews in the podcast and on YouTube. Happy Thursday. I am Brandon Olsen. Find me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with New York Giants on SI. Today's episode of Locked On Gators is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Florida Gators take on the Kentucky Wildcats. It is homecoming. DJ Lagway getting his first career start against a Power 4 program. Of course, his only other career start was against Samford, which is FCS. So not only is this going to be his first career start against a Power 4 program, his first career start against an FBS program. Not an easy one to have. I will say this. I think a lot of people were like, oh, well, bye week, you can get him set up. And it's like, well, the bye week would be his first FBS start against Georgia. So this is the better of the alternatives. I would also say that for everybody that looks upon Kentucky and goes, hey, it's Kentucky, they are pretty dang good defensively. They beat Ole Miss, who many people want Lane Kiffin to be the next head coach of the Florida Gators. That seems to be the general consensus of the fan base, that whenever Billy's gone, go for Lane, which we're not talking about. We're not getting into that until any firing is official. That's just not how we do things here. But this is a team that allowed 31 against South Carolina in week 2. And I think a lot of people looked at that and went, oof, that's an ugly loss, which it was an ugly loss. However, a lot of it was that their offense was completely inept. Other loss was to Vanderbilt. Gave up 20 in that game. Not bad at all to give up 20 to an SEC team that put up 40 on Alabama. Lost to Georgia in a game that was 13-12. Again, beat Ole Miss 20-17. Beat Ohio 41-6, and beat Southern Miss 31-0. This is a good defense. That's what Mark Stoops does. I know that there's so many people that look down on Kentucky, and I feel like this is something that we've talked about a lot, where Kentucky's that kind of team, which we'll talk about their offense in the next segment. But Kentucky's that kind of team where I like the saying, never argue with an idiot, because they'll bring you down to their level and then beat you with experience. That's how Kentucky plays football. Pittsburgh Steelers football. That's what they do. They're like, hey, we're going to make this really ugly, really messy, and no one's going to have fun watching it. But those are the games that we will win. And that's what they do. They execute that strategy against everyone. Again, they almost beat Georgia 13-12. I'm not saying, oh, almost matters, but 13, they made Georgia play an ugly, messy game. They beat Ole Miss 2017. Why? Because they made Ole Miss play an ugly football game. That's how they win games. They go, hey, we're going to make this hideous, but that's what we're going to win. And that's what Mark Stoops is going to try to do. And I feel like I can make this reasonable guess, estimate, whatever you want to call it, that Mark Stoops is going to try to throw everything he can at DJ Lagway. That he's going to go, you know what? We're going to give you a whole bunch of different looks. We're going to send some people, drop others. We're going to get real weird with it. Because here's the thing also. He should do that. That should be your approach. If you go, hey, true freshman making his first FBS start, or his first start against an FBS team, yeah, we're going to give you everything we can to cause some confusion, especially when you look at what DJ Lagway's done throughout his very brief career so far. Last week against Tennessee, he threw an ugly pick against Tennessee. Okay, I don't care about, Tennessee knew what play was coming. That part doesn't matter so much when you go, yeah, well, you still threw the ball. I think they're going to try to make this game ugly. You look at how they handled, and I'm not saying that these two players are the same because I do think that they're very different stylistically, and even despite they're both being very physically gifted, I think that they're different kinds of physically gifted. But you look at 2 years ago when it was Kentucky versus Florida, and Florida had Anthony Richardson. They had Anthony Richardson mentally just screwed up. He was boxed up mentally. Again, the inaccurate passes are on him. The turnovers are on him. But mentally, Kentucky just went, let's make this as difficult as we can for a guy that hasn't seen many of these things before. And that's what they did. And that's what they're going to do, I think, against DJ Lagway and Florida this weekend. Because, again, that's what they should do. Mark Stoops is not a bad coach. I don't think he's ever going to win a national championship. I don't think he's that kind of coach. I don't think he's an elite coach or a great coach. But I need people to stop going, oh, yeah, it's Mark Stoops. Like, Mark Stoops is a good coach. He teaches his guys to play disciplined football. They try to make you play undisciplined football, and that's how they beat you. It's really as simple as that. Mark Stoops is a good coach. Absolutely. Defensively, I think you could see a lot of zone coverage for a couple of reasons. One, zone coverage is easier to hide. It's tough to be like, oh, yeah, we're showing you this. And then we're just like, zone coverage is easier to go, oh, hey, we're going to show you too high and then rotate to cover 3 after the snap. As opposed to going, hey, we're going to show you too high and then rotate to cover 1. And now we've got to have a safety from deep set to come down and cover a tight end or whoever he's supposed to be covering. Leaves a lot of underneath room there. So I think you'll see a lot of zone coverage because it will help them disguise things. I also think that you'll see a lot of zone coverage because you're facing DJ Lagway if you're Kentucky. And when I think about when I'm facing a mobile quarterback, which I understand there's a lot of people. I posted the video of a split zone read, which is my favorite run concept. I posted the video of split zone read with Anthony Richardson running a 60-yard touchdown against Texas A&M. And a bunch of people replied with like, well, he's not that same athlete. He can't rip off the 60-yard run like that. Anthony Richardson reaches a different gear than that. So you can still run that play. It's just don't expect those same explosive results. But as far as it being a good play, it's just a good play. I don't get where some of that comes from. But defensively, if I'm looking at facing a DJ Lagway, then I'm going to say, hey, sit in zone. Because if you're playing man, like if you've played football before and you've had a good coach, you would know, hey, if we're playing man and they're sending people deep, we've got nobody with their eyes in the backfield unless it's a spy, which I do think are unreliable at times. And I still think they're kind of risky because if there's man coverage and a spy, you just got to beat the spy. And you got a 240-pound quarterback back there. It ain't easy to stop him. So I think looking at that, I'm like, all right, well, we'll sit in zone, keep him in front of us. And even though it's still hard to stop him, we can, 1, hope he slides. 2, engage and just let other people come up and gang tackle him. And 3, maybe he just looks at all the defenders in front of him with their eyes in the backfield and he goes, I probably shouldn't take off running here. I should just buy time. And then if I have to run and pick up, a couple yards, then I pick up a couple yards. If I have to throw it away, then I throw it away. But I think that you can limit a quarterback's legs by sitting in zone coverage. This defense doesn't blitz a lot. I do think that they might blitz more frequently than usual. Again, just to throw another wrench into the game plan of what DJ Lagway is seeing from this defense. So I think they might blitz a little bit more. But again, they're not at their bare bones a blitz-happy defense at all. They're going to sit and play sound football and beat you that way by making you play unsound football. Look at all the times that Kentucky has beaten Florida. It's been Kentucky running the football well, making Florida play unsound football. That's it. It's not like Kentucky's ever been, hell, yeah, we're going to come out and drop 50 on you, airing this thing out. No, they just run the football and make you play unsound football and take advantage of those opportunities. They're fine going, hey, we'll make this a battle of field goals right now. We have no problem with that. That's cool with us. That's what they do. And that's what Mark Stoops, that's how he wins games against better teams. That's it. I'm not saying I want Mark Stoops as a head coach whenever there's a firing, but that's how he does it against better teams. That's how Billy has tried to do it against better teams. It's just not been working out the way that he wants it to. The Florida Gators defense, of course, last year got wrecked by Kentucky. We will talk about the game this year next on Locked On Gators. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, I don't know, the NLCS is going on. Maybe you just like how it looks. Maybe you know that there's a lefty reliever warming up and you go, okay, well, Francisco Lindor hits really well off lefties. I'm going to go bet Francisco Lindor to get on base in next at bat. Whatever you want to do. Whatever you want to do. As long as you're betting on the Mets. Thanks. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day we are available daily and free reviews in the podcast and on YouTube. Looking at the Florida Gators defense against this Kentucky offense, I will say this. Or actually, before we even talk about that, I mentioned last year, Florida and Kentucky played, and Kentucky just Marshawn Lynch run the ball through a mother trucker's face nonstop. Last year, Ray Davis, Kentucky starting running back, who was I want to say 5th round pick with the Bills this year and is now playing for the Bills and had a big game on Monday Night Football. Last year against Florida, Ray Davis had 26 carries for 280 yards, 10.8 yards per carry, and 3 touchdowns, with 216 of those yards coming after contact. He had 11 missed tackles forced, 8 carries of 10 or more yards. Okay? Picked up 11 first downs or touchdowns. It's a lot. He kind of kicked the crap out of Florida. And as a receiver, had 1 catch for 9 yards and a touchdown. So he had 289 yards, 4 touchdowns on, 27 total touches? Yep, 27 total touches. That's what happened. Yeah, Ray Davis probably again, though. He is gone now. But now I look at a Kentucky offense that, first off, 2 of their starting offensive linemen, right guard and right tackle, are Jordan Herman and Gerald Mincey, both former Florida Gators. Okay, Jordan Herman got there this year. Gerald Mincey got there this year, but Gerald Mincey also spent a few seasons at Tennessee between Florida. So he's only played in the SEC, so there's that at least. But I will say that as a unit, this Kentucky offensive line, which is usually their strength, this Kentucky offensive line is really unimpressive in pass blocking. I'm not saying overall. I think they could still get the job done in the ground game. But in pass protection, this offensive line is not good. I don't know if it's, trying to gel everyone together. I don't know if it's something to do with the calls of the line or if Brock Vandagriff is contributing to that somehow negatively there. As in, I don't know if the communication between him and the line is sound there. I don't know what the explanation is for why this offensive line hasn't really been gelling, but especially on the edges, they have not been playing well this year. Okay. I do think that Jalen Farmer looked pretty good. Jalen Farmer, of course, left, like I said, after last season. And he was one of the players that we talked about on the show, not as oh yeah, big fans of his, but we talked about him on the show where we went, hey, look at where, all the guys that leave Florida and who we look at and we say, okay, well, that's a good player. Typically, we look at where they wind up and who's recruiting them. And in this case, we went, hey, Kentucky, we think of as a lower tier SEC program, but also when you look at their offensive line, they usually have a pretty good offensive line. And so I think that was a pretty good indicator of maybe he does have what it takes, and Florida just missed here, whether it was missing the evaluation or whatever it may be. But again, this offensive line has been unimpressive in pass protection. I will also say that given, and I'm not trying to sell lies, I'm not trying to buy in here, but given what Florida's defense has done the past 2 weeks in run defense, I feel a lot better about handling this Kentucky rushing attack. However, last year also Florida had already played Kentucky and played Tennessee and played a really good game in terms of defending their run. And then Ray Davis's 280 yard, 289 total yard game happened. I think that leaves a little bit of cause for concern there. But when you look at Florida's run defense right now, at one point, Florida had the worst run defense in the SEC by a large margin. Now they're second worst, with a big gap between the worst team, which is Mississippi State, with a big gap between the worst team, but also that's just pure yardage wise. When it comes time to stopping the run in terms of yards per carry, Florida's closer to the middle of the SEC there. Still not great, but closer there. And I will say as well, like quarterback run game has hurt them quite a bit, not so much designed run game, which is what killed them last year against Kentucky, was the designed run game. That counter trap killed you, absolutely. So this year, I'm not as concerned with that after seeing what Florida has done so far, especially in recent weeks. But also for me, the improved linebacker play is what we talk about, because that was a big thing that we spoke about on this show last year, is that the poor linebacker play was going to be or was the Achilles heel for Florida, because, and I know that people want to talk about Princely, like I'm bringing up a specific play. I'm not trying to just bring up Princely to bring up Princely, but there's a play where Princely shoots the inside gap and a bunch of people online were like, what are you doing? You have to go to the outside there. You can't give that up, whatever it was. And what really happened on that play was Princely was supposed to shoot the inside and Scooby Williams was supposed to go outside. So Scooby's supposed to Princely's supposed to occupy the offensive tackle there. Scooby is supposed to have a free run around the edge. Now on that play, Scooby just didn't rush. And last year, watching the linebackers play, there were a lot of just missed assignments in the run game. Simple as that. And you can look at it. Missed assignments throughout. They were bad linebackers last year. This year, you've got 3 genuine guys you could look at and say, hey, you could start on probably most SEC teams. Shamar Pup has been playing out of his mind, and Jaden Robinson has really come on in recent weeks. So I think you could look at the improved linebacker play, and that's what gives me a little bit of optimism for stopping the run against Kentucky this week. Also, I will say this, a team like Kentucky that wants to run the football a lot, one thing you need to be prepared for is that when a team wants to run the football a lot, they also usually want to take play action deep shots, and that is what Kentucky does. That's what Brock Vandegrift is looking to do. When they bring in Gavin Wimsatt, he's probably going to run the ball a bit more. They've been trying to rotate in Gavin Wimsatt as a rusher, which has been working pretty well. He was the Rutgers quarterback last year. I believe he was the starter when they beat Miami in the bowl game, and then he entered the portal. And again, he's looked pretty decent as a rusher. We saw him a couple times try to get in the end. Like, they bring him in situationally. It's not just like, oh yeah, every 3 drives there. So I will say this is a Kentucky team that I don't think is bad. I think they play their sound football. They try to drag it down to their level. But I think Florida this year is better suited to deal with it than they were last year. Again, I'm not trying to sell lies. I'm not trying to be overly confident in this Florida team at all. It's just I think they're better suited this year. We'll talk about predictions next on Locked On Gators. Guys, have you ever felt like you need a little boost in the bedroom? Well, it's time you stop worrying about your performance and get Hims, so you can feel confident knowing that you can be ready to go whenever you're in the mood. Hims is changing men's healthcare by providing you with access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your couch. Also, not just sexual health treatments. They've got hair. They've got everything. No insurance is needed, and one low price covers everything from treatments to ongoing care with thousands of trusted subscribers. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/lockedoncollege. That's him.com/lockedon for your personalized ED treatment options. That's him.com/lockedon. The products mentioned are chewable, compounded products which are not approved by or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions do apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan. Thanks for being Locked On Gators, your first listen of the day. Every day we are available daily and free wherever it's in the podcast and on YouTube. And like I said, with this game, I'm really not trying to sell lies. I'm pulling up the FanDuel lines right now. I'm not trying to sell lies. I'm not trying to say anything about Florida blowing out Kentucky. That being said, I am picking the Florida Gators to win this game. And I want to make it clear again, I am not selling lies here. I am not bought in on this coaching staff. I am not bought in on so much of what's going on around here. But I think it's a game that Florida could win, and I think it's a game that Florida should win, despite them presently being, 1 point underdogs against 1.5. Kentucky's 1.5 point favorites here. I will be taking Florida to win that game. I'll place the bet right after this, but I will select now Florida to win, and I'm taking the under, which is currently set at 42.5, which could be about all you need as an indicator for this game's going to be ugly, for a game with a line that low. For example, UCF at Iowa State, line's 49.5, and that game's probably going to be pretty hideous. So I wanted to say that to also say that I think this game is going to be ugly, okay? I think Kentucky will be successful at making this game ugly because that's what they do, that's what they want to do, and that's what they've been pretty successful doing. That's what Mark Stoops does. That's how he's beaten Florida now. Now he's beaten Florida 3 years in a row. He's beaten Billy Napier 2 years in a row. And every single time he's beaten Florida has been, we're going to make this game ugly and win that way. Okay, last year they blew Florida out playing that way. 2 years ago, Billy Napier's first year, Anthony Richardson's year as a starter, he played horrible, and they won an ugly game with Will Levis at starting quarterback. The year prior, Florida had, I don't even remember let me actually pull up the number of penalties that Florida had in that 2021 matchup against Kentucky, because Florida, that was the game where Kingsley Walken had so many penalties and Florida just refused to switch to a silent count. It was just ugly. Florida had 10 offensive penalties. 7 of them were on Kingsley Walken against Kentucky in 2021. Again, that was more self-inflicted than anything else, but the ugliness, right? 2 penalties on defense for Florida as well against Kentucky in that game in 2021. I think this game will be ugly. I think this Florida Gators team is better suited to deal with an ugly game than they were last year or even just a couple of weeks ago. Okay? I think the big difference here is that if Florida can create a big play here and there, which I do think you can do with someone like DJ Lagway as your quarterback, he does give you the oh my god plays. He does. I don't think the Florida Gators fan base has really opened up to that yet. I mentioned it on yesterday's show where I was like, he can get away with anything at this point. Like he's got like the invincibility star from Mario. Like he can do anything he wants right now. And that will eventually, again, come back down to earth. He makes some mistakes that I strongly disagree with and don't like. But he still gives you those big plays. That's the trade-off you get with a lot of these quarterbacks that give you these big plays. It's very rare to have a guy that gives you wildly successful plays and doesn't give you some of the ugly. You know, Caleb Williams gave you a lot of. Jaden Daniels, that was one thing with him, was he didn't give you a ton of ugly. And that's why his explosive plays were so impressive, because he took those huge risks, or what seemed like huge risks, or really huge calculated risks, and he didn't turn the ball over. DJ Lagway's still trying to figure that part of the game out. But for now, he's taking risks, and he's going to do that. But I do think that, a big play here, big play there. You see man coverage, roll out, run, pick up whatever you can while they've got their back turned. Go ahead. You could change momentum and take momentum there, okay? I also think that after a game like last week where it was so intense for Florida, I know a lot of people go, oh, you play an intense game like that, you're due for a hangover next week. I think playing an intense game like that where you should have won and then you lost, I don't think it's a hangover. I think it's we need to come out and do that crap again and do it better, okay? And I will say this, I don't think that this Kentucky team, while they can still run the football, I don't think they're as physical on the offensive line or at running back than we've seen in the past from them. Okay, so I don't think that this is Florida's just, or actually, hold on. I was going to say I don't think this is a case where you go, Florida's so much better. I do think talent-wise, Florida's a hell of a lot better than Kentucky. Coaching-wise, I think Mark Stoops is a good coach. Do I have to say the second half of that? The one that would be targeted at Florida's coach? I'm just saying, I think Mark Stoops is a great coach, or a good coach. I don't think that Billy Napier is. And I think he's proven that time and time again with his on-field coaching. And this is a thing where I think Florida has a lot more talent, but at a coaching deficiency here. I'm still taking Florida, but at this point, I am hoping for the best, preparing for the worst. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day, we are available daily and free wherever you listen to the podcast and on YouTube. For Locked On Gators, I'm Brandon Olsen. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with New York Giants on SI, and I'll see you all next time.